you are going to discriminate against people based off of things that they cannot change in favor of other people. And I think we all would rather have a system that is based off of merit. They have not done anything for our education system at all. There is zero evidence to show that they've done anything for that. They haven't increased any scores whatsoever. Our SAT scores are still the same since 1980. So if it's a useless government program, let's throw it out. DOGE has identified $321 billion of waste in the federal government.
So hi everyone, it's Classy here. Today I'll be doing this debate. I have three excellent debaters over here. There's of course myself, Classy on the liberal side. We have Arya from lovelyperfecttalks, also on the liberal side, and then we're joined by two conservatives, Tyler S. and Micah Kunkle, who you might have seen them on the Jubilee videos. Actually, that's how I found out about you. Actually, so we're gonna discuss three topics: DEI, the Department of Education, and DOGE, and sort of like Trump's action when it comes when it's about that. So we'll start with the first prompt, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Thanks for having a conversation.
Yeah. So let's see. Our first prompt. Sorry, I can't. Okay. So Trump's executive orders on ending DEI for federal programs are either good or bad. Micah, why don't you start off with your position first?
Yeah. So when it comes to DEI, I think we got to look at, okay, what is the actual heart behind the program, right? And the heart behind the program, I think, is inherently discriminatory. You are going to discriminate against people based off of things that they cannot change in favor of other people. And I think we all would rather have a system that is based off of merit. You are going to just have better programs, better employees, better systems if these things are based off of merit and not things that are unchangeable to the person. And so I support different executive orders that President Trump has made where he's walking back different DEI initiatives. And he specifically talks about in his executive order rewarding individual skill, individual initiative, individual performance over things like sex and gender and race. And so that's just kind of initially what I would say on the subject. But Tyler, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Do I go now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello everyone. Tyler, as introduced. Yeah, I'll just keep my statement simple, kind of similar to Micah's. My stance on DEI and DEIA, I believe it's something that's an example of a moral issue that is something that has good intentions but bad ramifications. And while it had noble intentions, it has been deemed not just something that has been not with sort of not necessarily negative implications, but more so just unnecessary to put it in a broader blanket statement, especially just coming in from a legal perspective, how it's in certain aspects unconstitutional and how we already have legal aspects, constitutional aspects in place for those intentions that DEI is supposed to have, such as the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and how in the Civil Rights Act we have Title VII, which guarantees equal opportunity for employment for people based on their physical identity. And then, of course, there's the aspect of the investment into DEI, which I'm sure will be part of what will be in our conversation later on for a different topic. But in regards from what I have seen personally, my research, there has been a lot of money to put generously, that's been invested in DEI. That has been, I'm just more that whether it's good that we got rid of it or not, or bad that we got rid of it. I'm more so curious about why we had to spend that much to begin with, and B, if there was any even results to show from it. So I'm very excited for this conversation, and I'm just very, very excited to hear everybody's perspective on this.
All right, thank you both. Thank you. So I'll go next then, Arya. So I do support DEI. I think these programs are very important. I disagree with Trump. Sorry, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I disagree with Trump. Executive orders that gets rid of these DEI programs. These DEI programs are meant to address societal issues, and they're also meant to comply with anti-discrimination laws. We have things like the Civil Rights Act that established that we have, we're not supposed to discriminate in the workplace. And DEI is really just a broad brush for a series of policies that we have enacted in the United States dating back to the Civil Rights era that are meant to make sure that people are in compliance with the Civil Rights Act as well as other constitutional amendments. And with DEI, we have the Civil Rights Act, but we also have the Equal Opportunity Commission, which investigates claims or charges for workplace discrimination. We have Title VII that protects victims of discrimination. And one of the things that concerns me is that Trump rescinded with his executive orders, LBJ's executive order 11246, as a specific example that it's meant to be a protection for federal contractors in regards to like race, gender, etc. So that's my position. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from the conservative side is a genuine anger, I guess, towards the implementation of this policy, which I completely understand is it's completely founded, but I'm confused on how the proposition to completely dismantle and get rid of any website that has the word diversity, any type of government program, any federal funding that goes towards any low-income neighborhood just because they might be considered diverse or inclusive. It seems like a huge overcorrection in the complete wrong direction. So my contention is just, if you guys think that we got here because of overcorrection in the wrong direction, that now we're facing reverse racism, now that it's unconstitutional, anti-constitutional because of the Equal Protection Clause, how is this an overcorrection? How is this going to solve the issue when it's a complete misdiagnosis of the problem? The problem was in implementation, not in the actual policies that were being affected. And this is also getting implemented in the most half-assed, like very rash way. It's resulting in the cutting of like the information of various different the Tuskegee Airmen, which I don't want to bring up like all of these little tiny specific examples, but the way that it was implemented was very messy, very disorganized, and not thought out to solve the actual issue that it aims to solve. It's just leading to a lot of chaos, a lot more division in these administrations than there was before, and just a lot more polarity in the overall like population of America.
All right, you guys want to respond to us, Tyler, Micah?
Yeah. So I guess you said that there's a lot of overcorrection on the conservative side. What specifically are you seeing where there's overcorrection? And I mean, I think me and Tyler can agree that we want to like be careful, and this kind of goes into the DOGE conversation too, but that we don't want to just go in and cut everything in a very rash way. We want to be smart about things, but we also legitimately want to cut things that aren't beneficial or that actively discriminate against other people, which I think DEI programs do. So what is kind of the overcorrections you've seen from the conservative side?
So the whole overcorrection was the executive order. I'm looking at the executive order now. Okay. One of the clauses says the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs within the Department of Labor shall immediately cease promoting diversity. My issue is that doesn't mean anything. That's just banning a word. That's not actually doing any type of policy. That's not actually implementing any type of process to go about to go about, equal opportunity in a fair way, not just pushing all of these quotas. I'm looking at another one, a term requiring such counterparty or recipients to certify that it does not operate any programs promoting DEI that violate any anti-discrimination laws. And then it goes on to just list a lot of words that are being banned: diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. It's very Orwellian, the banning and the language of this executive order. And my issue is how vague it is. What does it mean to promote diversity? That gets interpreted however it gets interpreted by however federal government program to, I don't know, let's say if someone wants to just bring back segregation. This is obviously a very ridiculous example, but what if they're saying that, segregation, not having co-ed schools is promoting diversity? My issue is it's overcorrecting by completely granting the executive authority and Donald Trump alone with this executive order. It's not giving it to the departments to let them figure it out, to let us progress and move forward. What happens if a liberal president just goes in and decides now we want all of the diversity, and we just end up overcorrecting back and forth in the same direction? We end up right back here in another 4 years. If that makes sense.
Tyler, you have something to say?
Yeah, I would love to ask a couple questions for Arya. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so there was a lot there, but happy to unpack all that. I'm gonna be probably a bit slower than what Micah's speed is at for this. Just because I've actually done a lot of research, like logging of the day-to-day like executive actions of Trump since he took office. I know as of at least to my knowledge, like from like the first few days when he entered office, he signed two official executive orders that were directly related to banning DEI in the federal government. And then he also signed a presidential memoranda that was particularly targeting targeting DEI initiatives in aviation, particularly with the Federal Aviation Administration. Which, from the grievances you addressed and the clauses, which specific executive order are you referring to? That was my first question.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the executive order ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity, signed on January 21st, 2025.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and which remind me what section is that in?
So within that, I was referencing Section 3, Clause 2, Part A, just the promoting diversity.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So that's the LBJ executive order. Am I correct?
Sorry, I'm like looking at it right now.
This. I'm pretty sure this also is the one that goes after the one from 1965, but that wasn't the clause that I was referencing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, okay, got it. So I actually did a little bit of research into this because I remember NPR had like a viral article about that story when he terminated that. I think because like I know that like the Instagram accounts like Impact or Change also addressed it also. While that did, I understand the controversy that sparked with it. The reason why I and I can't speak for Micah, but what I presume that both of us are not concerned about it is because the reason that, to my understanding, that executive order that LBJ signed was created pre the Civil Rights Act, which it meant that he was only able to take the steps to end racial-based or other identity-based discrimination within the federal workforce, because that is the capacity that he was able to operate within executive agencies. So once the 1964 Civil Rights Act got codified, when he also signed it later on in 1964, that basically made the executive order obsolete, technically speaking. Not to say that, not in the sense how like, oh, that strips back power from it, but more so like it doesn't change it one way or another, because the the rules and guidelines regarding employment policies are already codified in the books under federal law.
So
As
Well,
for the Mhm.
So I just want to say something about the executive order. So no, that executive order actually goes further than the Civil Rights Act because it establishes that there has to be a preliminary reports to the government regarding these federal contracts if there is a discrimination going on. If not, you just have to wait and see, and then wait for someone to like finally make a complaint. With this, we have like just normal reports going to the federal government to see if they're in compliance with the federal anti-discrimination laws. And there's more to it than that. It also establishes to make sure that these federal contractors are aware of their rights, that there is paid transparency with their pay. And I think that getting rid of this will ultimately lead to possibly us less likely finding out if there's discrimination among federal contractors.
yeah, and just to add on to that, a huge reason why we have all of these DEI initiatives in the first place, like the reason why they started in the early like 2010s, was because there's this huge study that came out in 2008, which I'm sure you've probably heard of. They did the callback test to see if foreign sounding names or American sounding names would get more callbacks. And they found that the foreign sounding names got twice or like 2 times less callbacks than the American sounding names. So even though there are these laws that are put in place, and even though technically, yes, it is illegal to have discrimination, the reason why DEI initiatives were put there in the first place was to make sure that people were just abiding by those rules. Now, if you want to talk about whether they overcorrected, about whether it was an implementation issue, whether or not there should be quotas, that's a completely separate issue. But this executive order just completely pulls all of that, just completely like rips it all under the rug. Like it's terminate all diversity, equity, equitable decision-making, equitable deployment of financial and technical assistance, advancing equity. They're using this executive order to pull funding from Harvard because Harvard is refusing to pull back its DEI initiatives. This isn't just about like getting rid of reverse racism or about the culture war. They're using this as a political tool to control to control Harvard in this one specific instance, but to control the way that the government is portrayed. The fact that diverse is completely erased from every Federalist website is absolutely Orwellian. It's insane.
So, okay, you talked about this study that talked about foreign names getting more callbacks. One, like, I don't think you can necessarily take that study and then say, oh, it's because of just business owners are racist and, are discriminating based off of names. You have to do more analysis into the study than that. And you have to actually look at, okay, what are the possible causes for this? So until there's like actual clear evidence that, hey, these people with foreign names are actually getting less callbacks because specifically they're immigrants or a different skin color or something like that, as opposed to other causes, I don't think you could necessarily use that to back up your point. But then secondly, I think to kind of reiterate what Tyler was saying earlier, we still have laws on the books. Like it's not like this executive order gets.
But how do you know these laws are being enforced, though? I understand that we have statutes, but how do you know these statutes are in compliance?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So to build off of what Micah said and to respond to what Arya said. Yeah, like I said in my introduction, I understand the intentions of DEI. I'm totally in favor of the concept of equal opportunity as a concept. I think that if you are, whether it's an agency of the federal government or corporate private firm, and they want to just broaden their application pool, totally, by all means do that. What I have concerns is the practice of it. There are 2 critical points that you made. I don't want to, because there was a lot there. You brought up the study about the names, about the name discrimination, and then there was it was either right before or right after that about the websites being removed. What did you say specifically?
the fact that there's no government website with the words diverse, equity, inclusion, accessibility. They got rid of a handicapped website accidentally because it had accessibility on it that they had to push back up.
Okay, so yeah, so to those points, I think like one that there's an yeah, I agree that that's a weird error that they made. But as for in regards to sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I don't think it's practical to make a blanket statement on it's problematic to just erase the terms DEI or DEIA on these federal websites. Like, I don't know how many government websites had them previously, but I would love to ask the question like, why did the General Accountability Office need a DEI website? Why did the Defense Department need one? Why did the State Department need one? Why did the National Archives and Records Administration need one? Why did the General Services Administration need one? Why did the EPA need one? That's the first part of that. And to the point about the name discrimination, I do understand to an extent why there may be that could be a realistic thing that occurs. The reason why I not 100% on board, like I do acknowledge like that possibly can't happen, but like I think it's not enough to just simply say like, because it feels like it could also possibly be a correlation without causation issue, because unless you can find like actual proof that these people that oversee like the application approval stuff, like there's actual like proof of them like saying like are actively discriminating against people
So
just because
would they need to go on record and
I don't think
say,
it's productive.
would they need to go on record
No, and not like a
and like
a
say
written confession.
I'm being racist in my choosing?
Well,
So
no, not
like
necessarily.
I'm just confused because you're asking for something that is just very like you. How would you get an employer to admit that they were being subconsciously racist?
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, we're probably not going to expect a CEO or whoever's in charge to like say like, oh yeah, I'm doing this bigoted stuff like on a written document.
So that's why we do blind studies.
Well, let me finish my point. It's very, it depends on it varies on the private sector, because some are, publicly traded private companies, some are private companies. So there's like little less transparency, but more often than not, there's usually there's usually like memos and briefings that usually sometimes get like either through internal documents or sometimes find their way out to the public about like people like addressing like, this is the current policy status of this company, or this is like, or something that like gets like external reviews or things like that. And especially like in the case of like, sometimes that they also get like federal grants or something, depending on if it's it varies on the agency, of course. But there's a process that adjudicates these various claims. And I understand, and I totally, and again, like I understand, like it's a bit tougher to find 100% transparency within the private sector, but I'm going to be a broken record about this. Is it a possibility that happens? 100%. And I'm sure we've all come across a person at least once in our life that has probably acted on that. So does that mean that's a common thing? I'm not, or like that's the norm. Even with that study, I'm not 100% on board. And that's why you hear a lot of conservatives talk about like, or advocate of a meritocracy application process, like, or where like, you don't even like, I'm all for like, not even like addressing anything beyond like a person's name or anything like that. Oh, maybe aside from their age or something like that, education background, of course. But like when it comes to like the broader sense of their identity, that's not relevant, because that goes back to the concept of equal opportunity. It doesn't matter who you are, what your is, as long as you have the grit and the possible credentials for whatever it is you're being hired for, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector. That's all that matters.
So I just want to say, so like Arya said, you're not gonna get a very clear confession from these employers if they discriminated something. That's why we have DEI, which collects data from these agencies, so we can know how many people are getting hired, how many times are their applications getting reviewed, how many times are they getting interviews. And here's something that's really interesting. So the federal government under DEI collects information on earning disparities. I'm going to post a link to the earning disparity. See if you can open it.
And
What does it say? Page not found? What happened there? Why can't we look at earning disparity?
Oh,
What is this link for?
Earning disparities. I can send you the archive link if you don't if you actually want to look at it. But yeah, you have to go to an archive site like Wayback Machine if you want to if you want to see like the earning disparities. But this link, what I just sent you, is supposed to basically it's an archive. Sorry, it's supposed to show, it's supposed to break down by race the amount of earnings people make in the various states. So oftentimes you'll see that, like, you know, black people might make a little bit less than white people, or Hispanic people might make a little bit less than white people. Let me see if I can get the archive link for you if you want to look at this. But like, I think this is extremely concerning though, because we're seeing a situation where it's very difficult to do research on this sort of work, and it's affecting the science field right now with the NIH grants. Like these executive orders are so broad, with essentially policing the language that we're supposed to use. So now in NIH grants, many words are being flagged. Everything from gender, everything from pregnant person, everything from racism or prejudice. How are we supposed to do research on health disparities if it's going to take longer to submit these grants because they might have certain words that the Trump administration doesn't like?
Well, so where exactly again on the executive order is he talking about words? Because I'm looking at it, I'm trying to find where he's banning words as opposed
He's
to
not
just
banning words.
specific positions.
He's not okay, but he's not banning words, but like words are being flagged as a
Okay, so
result.
if he's
Because
so then you can't argue. I mean, again, what you guys were talking about with DEI is that the implementation of DEI may be bad, and that's a discussion we can have. Well, I think that's fair to say on the other side too. Then if individual people within the administration are taking Trump's executive orders too far, that's an implementation problem, not necessarily a problem with the actual executive order.
But that's the heart of the issue, that this order is so broad, it could be interpreted in as many ways as possible. I mean, they removed the word gay from the website because it has gay in it.
If it's so broad, then show me where it is broad enough to include banning language.
I said it's flagging words.
Okay,
not
so I just wanted to hit on this point that Tyler said earlier, because he kept on emphasizing private sectors. The prompt was about federal spending and federal programs, and you yourself, Tyler, asked, you know, why does the Department of Education need a DEI? Why do all of these different departments or whatever need a DEI website? That DEI website would be the very website that's doing all of this transparency that you're saying that you wouldn't be able to find in the private sector. Would you not expect that in the public sector, in the government, that's supposed to be transparent, that's supposed to be the most transparent administration of the entire world? We've never had such transparency as this administration. It just doesn't make any sense. It's so hypocritical. It's not lining up.
Can you restate your claim just so I can respond to that?
You kept on bringing up the difference between private sectors. Like in private sectors, you wouldn't be able to get this transparency, and you wouldn't be able to expect that out of a CEO for a private sector. The prompt was about federal programs and about federal spending. So I'm talking about the government in specific. The government needs to have that level of transparency with its constituents to say, hey, we are taking these extra steps to make sure that we are going to less affluent neighborhoods, to make sure that we're giving them equal opportunity. We're taking these steps to make sure that, we're having like equal, like we're able to do paid internships, so that, you know, we're not just getting little rich white kids that can afford to not work for an entire year at the White House. Like it's these little things that are taking the right steps that are just completely gone now because the entire website's gone because it seems to be a very woke thing.
Well, I wouldn't say it's woke, but like there's a lot to unpack again. Not that it's an issue. But like what specifically did you say was removed from the you said the education department?
I'm not referencing something specific. I'm going off of your point. So earlier you were talking about all of these websites that you said. What was the purpose for these? Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, apologies for going minorly off topic there. But yeah, to your point about the within the federal government, yeah, I guess why there's probably like a faction of the country, like more so the right wing apparatus that is against. Sorry, there was just a lot of points there. From again, what can you give me the core contention with the programs particularly?
Should the government not have a certain level of transparency with us? Does the government not have a duty to make sure that they're going out of their way to make sure that us as constituents are assured that we are not facing any type of discrimination or any type of racism or any violation of the Equal Protections Clause?
Okay, I understand now. To answer your question, yes, 100%. We do deserve transparency in the name of civil rights and in the case of injustices. The issue that I guess that where Micah and I are coming at is that we already have them in place. Like there are literal agencies like under the DOGE, we have the we have the Federal Civil Rights Commission, we have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as outlined previously. In regards to like the need for investing into the funds for specific agencies, I guess the two aspects of it is why if they're like let's just establish like from your guys' side that we need them, they shouldn't be cut. Okay, that's fine. Then and I'm not expecting either of you guys to like remember every single thing that's been cut, but like the fact that these have been cut and been pulled back, and they apparently have supposedly be within the tens of millions in terms of grants and contracts. Let's just use the education department as an example, or the EPA or whatever. The question is like, why do we need to invest so much into it, and why can't it just be reallocated to what was already in existence previously pre-DEI?
So Arya, respond to him, and then we're gonna have to move on to the next topic because we're a little bit over time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Allowed to say.
I guess I think that in determining whether or not these initiatives are going in the right direction, you should look at whether or not they're effective, whether they're proportional to the problem, and whether or not they're justified. And I don't think that they're being effective because they're being held up in court right now because of how vague the executive orders were. It's every single one is facing a lawsuit. It's not being carried out even in the way that he wants it to be carried out. You have all of these private sectors, Costco, Amazon, whatever, that are, I don't think Amazon, but I know Costco, that are, martyring themselves for DEI. These universities like Harvard that are also doing that. So it's not effective. It's not proportional to the problem because there still isn't any. I haven't, the same way that you guys are not accepting my 2008 study, I don't see any evidence that we have this egregious reverse racism and this very rampant lack of a meritocracy. And then it's not, I don't think that it is correct diagnosis of the issue. That was over implementation, not the actual programs and the initiatives themselves.
Okay. Micah, do you want to have the last?
All that, but we're running short for time. Dang it.
Yeah, sorry. Micah,
Yeah.
do you want to have the last word on that, and then we'll move on to the next thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, to just kind of go back to what I was initially saying, like the heart of what I think is at a lot of DEI programs, which we never really got talking to a lot about. We talked about more about the implementation of Trump's executive order. rather than I think what is the main issue, which is what the actual heart is behind these DEI programs, which is like actual discrimination against other people based off of characteristics that they can't change about themselves. And you do have a lot of reverse discrimination lawsuits that have happened. I know one in particular in North Carolina. There was a white male that was awarded $10 million because they found that he was fired wrongly, right? So I think there are plenty of those examples in the workforce. I think any program that isn't basing their initiative or their hiring practices or based off of initiative and skills and performance is doing something wrong. And I think that's what the executive order aims to do, is to correct that. And if you read the actual executive order, I think one, you see that that's what the heart is behind the order, but two, I don't read in the executive order this banning on language that you guys were claiming is in it. So
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next topic. We actually already mentioned the Department of Education, so it's a good time to mention that. So the second prompt is Trump's initiative to dismantle or minimize the Department of Education is good or bad. Tyler, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Yeah, I am 100% in favor of the complete and total shutdown of the federal Department of Education. It's important to acknowledge, though, that President Trump's executive order that he signed regarding it does not immediately shut it down. You need to go through an act of Congress, which is probably unlikely. But it does initiate the beginnings and the minimizing of the agency itself. It's important to acknowledge that in this conversation we are talking about this within the capacity of the federal agency itself, not schooling or education as a concept. From the stuff I have researched on it, it has been a major burden on American public education. We've poured over $3 trillion in federal spending in its 45 years of existence, and there's almost nothing to show for it. I'm happy to expand further as we get into our conversation, but that's my core contention.
Micah?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Tyler said. I think, there's nothing to really show for the Department of Education. The math scores, science scores, reading scores have all remained relatively flat since it was initiated. Same with like SAT scores. But additionally, to kind of add on to what Tyler was talking about, the question is, why should this be something that the federal government does in the first place, right? Like, why don't we leave it to the states to decide how the states should run their own education programs? We don't need nationally mandated rules when it comes to what we should be teaching kids. That should be decided by local communities. And the local communities should have the right over their children, not the federal government. And so I have just a major issue with the Department of Education on that point, because it does seem pretty unconstitutional to me.
Okay. You want to go first now?
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, outside of the fact that trying to dismantle a department that was created by Congress via executive order is horrendously overreach, but the Department of Education was created to help address a segregated school system because northern states and southern states were treating their their students like very unequally. It's there to serve as a national watchguard over the education system, make sure that Title IX is being implemented, Title VII, Title I, Pell Grants, IDEA kids, disability. It's there to make sure that all of the most vulnerable students are still able to get an education, because fundamentally that is what creates a good society, is an educated youth. I think that even if you wanted to make the claim that the Department of Education was overreaching in its curriculum, which the Department of Education doesn't have any real power over state local curriculum. I graduated from New York with a New York State Regents diploma. I'm sure that if you guys didn't go to New York, you have no idea what a Regents is, because my entire high school curriculum was completely dictated by New York State. So I don't know how much the Department of Education even does in that sense. But even if you wanted to go that route, not having any type of national standard for the entire country is just going to lead to a horrendously divisive country where, you know, in a very ridiculous, absurd world, you'd get southern states teaching the creationist theory and having the Bible everywhere, and then northern states just, I don't know, having litter boxes in the bathrooms.
Perfect. So I agree a lot with what Arya just said. So like the Department of Education doesn't dictate national curriculum. We're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a national curriculum. And it's interesting because a lot of conservatives like to cite that like, oh, we're like number 40 or number 30, whatever, when it comes to like test scores in math, science, and reading. But what is really interesting though is that all the other countries, most of the other countries that outperform us, have some sort of national curriculum. Do I think the United States necessarily should adopt a national curriculum? I don't think so, but I think that's like maybe possible something we should look into, that because states have so much and local municipalities have so much control over their educations, why we have this sort of disparity of test scores between the states. So if you look at places like Minnesota or Massachusetts, their test scores are actually on par with the Scandinavian countries, whereas some of the southern states are actually even underperforming even some countries in Central America. I think the Department of Education is very important because it provides funding for Title I schools, which are the low-income schools. It is a watchdog or federal oversight to make sure that there's no discrimination at the schools, that it creates an equitable environment. And there's a concern that like if it wasn't for the Department of Education, we don't have this federal oversight, that schools can start to resegregate because there wouldn't be anything stopping them. But the state laws that they have might be different, and they might not be good enough to make sure that there's a equitable environment. Though I understand that even with getting rid of the Department of Education, the Trump administration has said that they still plan to, of course, have funding for students with disabilities, and I think they also do plan to continue doing the Pell Grant. But my concern is that if we get rid of this, the Department of Education, or even just minimize it, that this would disrupt these services. And I'm very skeptical that we can do this in a manner, even if it's just minimizing it, that wouldn't disrupt these very important services. I think all of us can agree that like children with disabilities deserve to have the best possible education possible, even if they just go to a public school, and that I don't know, you might have some disagreement with the Pell Grants, but we'll see.
Yeah, so I mean, Trump has already clarified that he's going to move some of this funding to other departments. So I don't think that's really a problem with getting rid of the Department of Education. He's already talked about, yeah, like as you said, the different grants, the Title I funding, different things like that. He's already talked about moving those to other departments that can handle them. And so I don't really see the problem with moving those funding aspects to other departments, but then getting rid of the rest of the department, which does implement things like Common Core, which has been wildly unsuccessful.
If I can build off of what Micah said, yeah, there's a lot more nuance to consider in regards to. This isn't just a recent development. This is something, a grievance that has been built, that has been again 45 years in the making. To Arya's point about the historical background of the education department's founding, there's actually pre-ED, we had something called the I forgot the it was called the the Education, Welfare, and Health Department, I think, or health, or it's one of the orders that it went in. But yeah, it was sort of like a combination of what we have with the HHS and the ED, but slightly more minimized and condensed because it kind of had a sort of common overlap over the federal stuff, while the majority of it was under the various states' control of their education system, and that was because of course there's common overlap with federalism principles. But to the point about like over concerns of like complete polar opposite teaching state by state, I don't see that necessarily being the case. Again, like this goes to, like, for me, I can't speak for for everybody else's reasons on my side why we're against it, but like the big thing for me is the whole concept of following the money. This is the most shocking like statistics that I think come out of this whole conversation. The fact how since 1979, which is when the ED was officially established, we have spent over $3 trillion on public administration at the federal level. $200 billion alone came from the COVID-19 pandemic. And from the recent reports of the last decade or so, sorry, I was, oh my God, sorry, getting a phone call. Just from the recent reports from the National Report Card, I believe, which is from the Education Department, that's where they get like their official scoring and stuff, and it's collected from the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It showed so many bad ramifications of what just appears to be just very weak and weak results, like in regards to where a couple of them. Oh yeah, the fact how sorry. Okay, so yeah, like the U.S. students ranked at a dismal at 27th out of 37 organization for economic cooperation countries, and when it comes to math, we don't have like the 13-year-olds math scores have dropped at their lowest levels. 13-year-olds reading scores have also dropped to their lowest level in over 30 years. There are so many people that are young youth in particular that have they're not progressing in their basic common educational pathway and criteria. And to your point about how we don't have a national curriculum, you are correct about that. But as what Micah said with policies like Common Core, we did try to initiate commonality practices, like in terms of standardized testing, but there has been no net positive development about it. And to Arya's point about like how, like, because I'm from California, I grew up in the California school system. As in New York versus California alone are very different school systems. But that actually kind of proves the point I'm making about how the majority of funding, I think like over 80 to 90% of public school funding in each state comes from their own state and local governments, not so much from the federal government. I think that in a perfect world, if I had heard that number about the 3 trillion investments over the 45 years, I would imagine that our education system would be unmatched by anywhere else in the world because of all this money poured into it, but with nothing really to show for it, and it's just gone in the opposite direction. So even if like whether we agree or disagree on whether the department should stay or not, I think there's an even bigger question about like we need better I don't understand like how there can't be an acknowledgement of the investment not going in the right direction, no matter what party is in the White House or has control of Congress. That's like the majority of my core contention with this.
All right, do you want to respond?
That was a lot.
Sorry.
No,
you want
yeah,
me to
you're
go
good.
Back to...
Well, hang on. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying in theory.
Yeah,
I'm
but-
just like, how much money do you think where do you think the money in the Department of Education is primarily going? That's like the biggest waste that's so egregious, because it's not administrative costs.
It's among the smaller departments,
sorry, there's
actually.
a glitch. Sorry, there's a
so
glitch. What was your question?
No, Arya was just saying that, like, basically, in terms of like Department of Education, in terms of their cost, for their administrative cost, it's not like the majority of the funding that's going to the Department of Education.
Yeah, like you made the point that most of the funding that schools get is from their state and local government. I agree. I feel like that kind of goes to my point. Like, we already have a pretty state-focused education system. The whole reason why the government is there is for the states that don't have it. So like the Title I schools that won't have it, which I know you guys said would be reallocated to, I don't know, probably Department of Treasury or something. But I think that like really undermines how like massive of an education system we have in America. Like in 2024, I think the Biden administration tried to do this whole new thing with the FAFSA grants, with the student loans, and just them reworking the way that the website went was like a horrendous shit show of a rollout. They didn't have any of the resources to properly roll it out. Colleges had to end up pushing their deadlines like a month back. Their acceptance days like a month back, because they didn't have enough time to get the information that they needed from the government. Like, this is already a very stretched out agency that I think, I'm not saying to give it more money. I'm not saying that we need to give it more money, but I don't think that completely dismantling it and reallocating it to already other stressed out agencies is going to help the children. Not to be cliche, but like help the kids.
But you brought up the point about like administrative fundings. What was your core contention with that?
Yeah, most of the money that goes towards the DOE is not spent on like bureaucratic administrative costs. It's not like it's like this huge like funnel that's just taking money.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I actually do agree with you because I have done the research on it. But what an interesting correlation statistic that I found out while doing research on this is that data that we do have on the issue of administrative employment within the education system, and this is directly from the Digest of Education Statistics, between 2000 and 2021, administrative staffing for public schools have increased by about 95% or so, with a 39% increase in the number of principals and assistants. And then in that same time period, in regards to student growth, it barely surpassed 5%, and double that also with barely minimum growth with teachers at 10%. So I think, and then maybe this will be like probably like the best middle ground that we'll have on this issue, if not on the department itself, but just on public schooling in general, is that we need more funding into teachers in particular, and maybe like slightly less into administrative stuff. You know, even though like there's probably not already an administrative, but definitely more funding needs to be going into like teacher recruitment and resources, because I think that will be the biggest driving point into the success of education directly, because they are the ones that are working figuratively and literally on the front lines with, you know, the future of America.
All right, sounds like we're in agreement. I guess the debate is over now.
Yeah.
All right,
no,
Micah, you got something you want to add?
No, I mean, again, I just feel I don't understand your point, I guess, with the whole like moving funding to already stressed out departments. Like, that doesn't seem like a really hard thing to fix. You just hire more
To
people.
Arya's example, though, with
you
the
would
whole
just
like
wait, hang on. You would just hire more people?
Yeah, you would
I'm all for
allocate.
it, yes.
Yeah, you would
agreement.
move these funding to these other departments, and you would allow
Hell
more
yeah, expand the
people.
government.
Well, yeah, maybe expand. Conservatives aren't always against expanding government. That's not something that we're always against.
Fiscal spending, sensible spending.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I'm totally fine with moving this funding and, whatever, hiring some more people in these other departments to handle it. And then dismantling the Department of Education so that we don't get things like Common Core, and we don't, just waste other money on, national education standards that don't do anything. Like they have not done anything for our education system at all. There is zero evidence to show that they've done anything for that. They haven't increased any scores whatsoever. Our SAT scores are still the same since 1980. So if it's a useless government program, let's throw it out.
I think your contention is like the specific policies the department has done and not the department itself. I don't see a reason to completely abolish it or minimize it if you actually agree with most of the policies it actually implements. And like Arya said, like any sort of rewiring, or whether good or bad, whether you agree with it or not, can cause problems in the long term. And I think getting rid of an entire department could probably cause more problems than actually solves problems.
Why? What
Yeah.
makes you say that?
Well, because of like what's happening right now, with the whole thing with like getting rid of USAID, with like allowing a lot of food to sort of spoil for a lot of people, with even like back home, like there are USAID programs back home that we're shutting down. With just like read this recent article in the NPR that DOGE shut down this program that would have essentially it's supposed to help like disabled students kind of like transition from high school to college. So when you shut down these programs, like that might not have been the intended purpose, right? It could just be that his purpose was just to minimize the program as much as possible before like we get rid of entire. But just having these changes can have these unintended consequences that you basically shut down these like smaller programs, and then it has detrimental effects for students, because it just seems like you're just like hitting the sort of building with a bulldozer, and you guys don't even have a construction crew like ready to clean up the mess.
Can I respond
ahead,
to that point? Yeah, and then also like building off what Micah said. Yeah, I understand your perspective, and I think that, and I can also, because I grew up in California my whole life in a very deep blue area, always the one red speck in my community. So like I can understand from your perspective like the bulldozer analogy, because unfortunately with characters like Trump and Elon with their egos, it kind of can present that way from the other side. But what I will say is that, and this is just my own bias. This is my subjective opinion. I don't have anything to base this off of, but I'm under the impression that Trump is not stupid with how he's approaching this. There's a bunch of different policies we could go over, but let's just focus on this one. I don't think that he is being idiotic in the sense of who he, like for example, specifically hiring Linda McMahon to be the current secretary of the education. I don't think that he's being an idiot in having Elon hire specific people over specific aspects of DOGE to audit through parts of the ED within their executive capacity. I think that there's like I mean obviously I'm not in the room when that happens, neither is Micah, but I don't think that it's under the like a bulldozer. Yeah, you're all right. There will be some flaws and drawbacks, but I think that stuff can be easily adjudicated. But one thing I really want to not press on you guys, but I am curious to hear your perspective on, because like you guys brought up the proposal of a national curriculum. You are correct. We don't have one in place currently, but we have like aspects of it, such as with Common Core. What's in the use of that specific model, do you guys believe that's been a net positive or net negative for our public schooling system?
So I personally think that we should move away from centralized testing and look into policies that are meant to sort of improve an individual student's performance So have a more individualized approach to education in the same way that we would do the same way people do it in Finland. For sure. I think that there's a lot of reforms we could do to fix our education in this country that doesn't involve just more standardized testing. If anything, that's actually part of the problem. And I live in Massachusetts, for example. We recently voted for initiative to make our standardized testing for our secondary schools, the MCAS, to make it that's no longer a necessary requirement to graduate high school. So I don't, like I said, I don't agree with every policy that is put out by the Department of Education. I support its bones, I support its main functions, but I think that there are certain policies, initiatives that have been implemented that haven't pushed us in a positive direction. And it didn't start with Common Core. I think people, maybe you guys probably have similar criticisms with No Child Left Behind.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I'll on the No Child Left, I actually am not that plugged in on that. If Mike has a thought on that, I'll let him take that over. But you brought it. First of all, I'm glad that we are in agreement that there's definitely needed reforms on standard, not just Common Core, but just how we go about standardized testing in this country. I think that's another point that we're all in universal agreement on. So I'm happy about that. But you brought up another point that I almost forgot, that I'm glad that you indirectly reminded me of. That's another problem, I think, why people on our side are in favor of just going about a permanent shutdown while reallocating resources to other agencies. A lot of us are going off of this. I mean, I think both sides, like, not, I don't want to put anybody's words in anybody's mouth, but I think that, like, both sides, not necessarily in this debate space, but in general, go on the wishful thinking of, oh, if I just elect the president with my party values, or I get the Congress with my party values, then they'll take care of, like, getting all the right funds to all the right places with the department. That they'll make sure that everything is allocated the right way. They'll hire the right director for OMB to make sure that they actually get the budget that they need for these specific policies and programs. This goes back to the biggest date range in this whole statistics in this conversation. It's been in existence for 45 years with multiple different administrations, both Republican and Democrat, multiple different periods of party control, sometimes with trifecta leadership in both parties. I feel like if there was something that was, like, in dire need of change, however we interpret that perspective of change, we would have seen that at some point. But instead, I'm going to go back to that $3 trillion statistic. We should, with a number that grand in terms of investments, again, for public education, I feel like there should be results by then. What those results are necessarily, I don't know. I can't put a specific label on it, but I think it should be something that's way better than the current reading scores that we have currently, the current math scores that we have currently, the current ratio of peer pupils to teachers. As it should be improved from that perspective. And that's all I have to say about that. So do you guys want to?
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that we're all in agreement. Like, I think that a lot of the problems with the education system could be, like, seen just as, like, it's too factory oriented. It's too like direct input output. Like, you need to directly, like, take in whatever information and just, like, spit it out. I think that a lot of that started during, like, Sputnik, when we were, like, racing with Russia to try and develop, like, the best and brightest and the strongest engineers. So I think we're seeing, like, a lot of the after effects of that, and I think that we're seeing that it's not working, and that kids, obviously, we're not getting smarter. Like, my sisters, I have little siblings. Like, the stuff that they come home, I don't even understand the math that they're doing, because it's a completely different math that I learned. Like, it's like third grade math, and I don't even understand the fractions that they're doing. So I don't understand that they're supposed to get it. But they are making like little tiny steps. Like New York State had these required state tests. Now they're optional. You can opt out of them if you want. You used to have to do subject tests for for biology, for physics, for chemistry. Now we don't have to do this SAT subject test. We used to have to do a Regents. Regents is still a final, but it's not weighted as much as it used to be weighted. So I think that we are making these little tiny steps in the right direction. It's obviously not going fast enough. So I understand the sentiment of like just burn it all to the ground, just get rid of all of it. But I guess this is just a very institutionalist view of me. I think that if we are making like little steps in the right direction, the best way to keep going and that momentum is by having like a centralized agency that's just making sure that we are making those right steps and like taking the right approaches. Like a lot of colleges are doing test optional now. You don't need to do an SAT or an ACT to apply. A lot of jobs are doing now more vocational experience. Now they don't require a 4-year bachelor's to get a job anymore. I think that a lot of it is just more culture, like culture shifts and implementation that the DOE could be repurposed into guiding rather than just completely abolishing it.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a closing remark because we're a little bit over time again, and then we can then move on to those. So I'm gonna say something, and then Micah and Tyler, you could also then have the last word. So I think that the Department of Education has a lot of essential functions that I'm not confident that simply getting rid of it and moving it to other agencies is the way to go, because I think that in that sort of transition, a lot of chaos will ensue that could possibly make our situation even worse. Something I didn't touch on that I should have mentioned is another function of the Department of Education is research. And it's interesting because you guys mentioned the National Report Card or the National Association of Education and Progress. That comes from the Department of Education. The numbers that you cite, that Trump cites, comes from the Department of Education. And if we don't have the sort of federal oversight, how are we going to know how good students are doing across states? We can't trust every single state agencies. I'm sure maybe you guys are a little bit skeptical of the blue states. Maybe, I'm skeptical of how the red states do it. And we have this sort of federal oversight. Very important also is, again, the anti-discrimination aspect, in that the Department of Education, again, provides this federal oversight to make sure that every student has a right to equitable education. 90% of the students in the United States go to public school. 95% of disabled students go to public school. Public school is not going anywhere. And I think that we should have some sort of way to keep these schools accountable, and having this infrastructure is vital for that.
Tyler,
Okay.
I'll let you do the last statement on this one.
Okay. All right. So I appreciated both of your guys' perspectives. You definitely gave a lot of valid points that I'm sure that we should consider. I and I presume Micah both still have our same convictions still at the end of the day. I do think that it is necessary that we should. I think it's something necessary that we need to take into permanently shutting it down. Obviously, those specific micro groups and agencies that may have oversight from the ED currently, I think could easily operate and smoothly function over other similar agencies, such as like FAFSA can easily be overseen by the Department of Treasury, for example. To your point about the stats that I came up with for like the National Report Card and other stuff. Totally hear what you're saying, and that goes back to what I guess I didn't really say, but I indirectly said it, that there could be a possibility of still some national federal oversight, just more minimized, kind of like going back to what we had pre-Department of Education, which was the Health and Welfare and Education Department, which I guess is by and large what the modern day HHS, Health and Human Service Department is. It's just that, named Human Services, I think that would probably be the best agency to oversee the reviews and stats on public education, because, that is a part of our public health, in my opinion, knowing the mental and social function of our youth. I think that would be that's the best and most logical place to allocate that as an example. I'm sure that there's a lot more that we can unpack, but and whether we agree to disagree at the end of the day, I'm glad that we all agree on this topic, that that the bureaucracy definitely needs reform, and the way that we go about centralized, standardized testing definitely needs improvement, among other things. So happy about that.
Oh, yeah.
Micah, any final thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
No, I mean, I think Tyler summed it up pretty well.
All right, sounds good. All right, so
And yeah, I'd hate to cut it short, but I do need to be getting out of here probably around 7. So
okay, sorry, in
need
my
this.
time. Wait, sorry, can you tell me like how much
or
time you
sorry,
have left?
in like 20 minutes.
In like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just do 15 minutes for the next topic then.
Okay.
Okay. So the next topic finally is going to be on DOGE and Elon Musk and whether or not it's been forced for good. Micah, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, overall, I think DOGE has been pretty beneficial at identifying waste. I think I'm not comfortable with DOGE having like power to actually implement these changes. Those should be recommendations to the departments, and then the heads of the departments decide whether they want to implement those changes. But that's not what DOGE is. It doesn't have the power to implement these changes within the actual departments. And so in that regards, DOGE has been really great. I mean, I was just looking before this at the US debt clock, and it was saying that DOGE has identified $321 billion of waste in the federal government. And so, I think eliminating any waste is good in the federal government, and saving taxpayer dollars is a good thing to do, even if overall it doesn't really help us with our national debt.
All right, Tyler.
Yeah, to build off of what Micah said, I am also completely in favor of Trump and Elon working to having established this Department of Government Efficiency. At its core purpose, it's about slashing and eliminating government waste. It's something that has been long overdue and absolute necessary. We've kind of already sort of sprinkled around the topic on the other previous two stuff, but Mike and I have acknowledged that there have been some bumps along the way with certain stuff that have been canceled, but then had to get re-brought back in because they were viewed to be a necessary good. So on this ground side, I think by and large it has been absolutely necessary. And when I have done some research into like the day-to-day like tweets and posts that DOGE will make about like the stuff they have canceled, and like I would like double fact check to see if it's an actual thing that was existing, like on the usaspending.gov website. A lot of them there's not one that I was able to easily find for every single one, but there was a lot that I was able to find. It was proven to be true. So that is proven that there is indeed waste. And it's been commonly known that waste and fraud can occur in every single government agency. I think the most important report/statistic that can be cited in this whole conversation comes directly from the Government Accountability Office from a study done from 2018 to 2023, I believe it was published last year, that approximately 233 billion to 521 billion annually the funds can be lost to fraud. So it's definitely an underrated issue and within the capacity of the operations of federal governments. And obviously we don't have the time of day to list every single thing they've eliminated, but from what I have seen, by and largely, it's been good, and I hope that they are successful in their 2-year time period until they're finished.
All right, Arya, you want to go?
Yeah, okay. So I'm glad that Micah said that the DOGE should just be doing recommendations. I agree. I think that my biggest issue with Elon Musk and what DOGE is doing is the blanket statements of fraud when there's no investigations that have proven fraud. Just like using the executive order that was given to make the department. The executive order itself said that there was going to be like a mini team set up, and they were going to go to each department. They were going to coincide with like the department heads and do all of these like recommendations, and there was going to be like a lawyer, a forensic analyst, and it was like a lot more planned out than what the actual execution was. So my issue isn't with the idea, it's more with the implementation, with Elon Musk going in. He's not even officially listed as like the department head of DOGE. That's still confused on whether or not he's a special government employee or not. I feel like he's horridly overstaying overextending his authority. And I guess that's my biggest issue with it, because Congress has the sole power of the purse. I don't think Elon Musk, as like one of the largest federal contractors, should be like getting his little grubby hands all over it.
Okay, so to my point, I'm gonna say that before Doge even started, I think that there were a lot of issues with it that I was quite skeptical that some people on my side ended up being right on. So Elon Musk and Trump campaigned that they were gonna look for $2 trillion step, but then when Trump got elected and Elon Musk started his Doge initiative, he changed it to 1 trillion. And now he's saying that his goal is going to be 150 billion, but his 150-day stay at the White House is about to come to the close, and so far the official figures have it at slightly over 300 million. I think having the world's richest man, who also has a bunch of federal contracts with the government, that also has a bunch of pending federal cases with the government in regards to concerns about labor, in regards to his company, whether it's people in SpaceX speaking out against him and then being fired for it, or whether it's with Tesla, where there being concerns about not being able to unionize. I don't think Elon Musk is a person for the job for transparency. And it seems that time and time again, he has misrepresented or just straight out lied what his agency has actually solved, whether it's the 8 billion that we're supposed to save from ICE, when actually it was around 8 million. And then in the end, it was only like 2.5 million, 5.5 million, because 2.5 million was always spent. Or I think there's the 1.5 billion that we're supposed to save. I believe it was from the Treasury, but that turned out to be something that was done during the Biden administration. Overall, I think Doge, while in concept, sounds good. And I think that seeking out corruption, waste, fraud, abuse is a nonpartisan issue that we can all agree on. I think that having Elon Musk in charge of that was a terrible decision. And I don't think we've gotten anything closer from to those initiatives of seeking out fraud and waste.
For the good number today, as a reminder to use the green link only. Once your good number is called, if you want to line up,
Tyler, just jump in. Yeah.
Okay. So, to both of your guys' point, this might possibly be the biggest, as minimal as it might be to some, this might probably be the biggest agreement middle ground that we'll have on this issue, is the fact of Elon's influence within Doge itself. Because I actually agree, I can't speak for Micah, but he sort of touched on it. I actually agree with you guys to an extent that that I don't think that Elon should be butting his head in regards to his commentary on industry aspect, government's influence on industry, particularly with SpaceX and like how the push that he wants with commercial spaceflight. I think it's problematic because it colludes with like what contractors like Lockheed Martin and Boeing are trying to do, because like that will impact their companies with like working with the government for their space technology. So like on that part, I do agree with you guys. On the aspects of like how he's like, there's no, like, he's being loose on defining fraud and waste. I don't have any proof of this. This is just going off on an assumption. My understanding is that DOGE is sort of working based on the terminology of the government accountabilities office's definition of waste and fraud. It's like established terminology on this specific issue, since they're technically they're supposed to be technically the DOGE, or well, not necessarily the DOGE in itself, but they're technically the government's auditing agency. And to shoot, there was another point there was like a third point that you guys both brought up at the end of both of your points. What was it specifically?
The lack of transparency.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's it. Yeah. So I kind of understand what you're getting at with that, because like, yeah, I will agree that it is a little bit frustrating to like not have like a direct, like for somebody like who follows the DOGE Twitter account, for example, it is very, and yes, I do call it Twitter, not X, come at me, I don't care. Yeah, it's a, cancel me for dead naming, who cares? I would love it so much more if like they created like a subtweet comment in their like, hey, here's the link to this like USA spending to show that this is what we canceled, instead of someone like me who is a big research nut and loves the aspect of the research having to take the extra mile to like find it, so that like there isn't less speculation. So on those grounds, I do agree. And like I think like the best argument I can say follow up on that, for like, again, this is a biased speculative opinion, but I have faith in particular, this goes back to Trump and who he's decided to hire. I think, like, for example, we don't have the time to go through every single thing DOGE has gone after, but I have a lot of faith in regards to Secretary Hexeth, the defense secretary. Like, he says that he's fully allowing DOGE to audit the Pentagon so that they can have their first successful audit in like I think like 6 to 8 years, which is a big deal. The fact that there's been easy cooperations with groups like the EP, with like the intelligence communities, like the DNI and the CIA, which is another also a huge success, because there's a lot of distrust on both sides regarding our intel community for a variety of reasons. The fact how USAID, while I understand your guys' point, like they can't, like, they're not directly shutting it down. What they're doing is like more so giving recommendations that the State Department can use to allocate the remaining funds. But like what I have seen, at least from like what's publicly available, there's been a lot of unnecessary like grants and contracts within like USAID alone. Same thing with such as like the Department of the Interior and the HHS, that's also like publicly available on the NIH website on various projects that have been terminated as a result of DOGE. I wish I can have a whole field day like going in. I would love for us to go like point by point of like which one was good, which one was bad. But again, like I think the best thing I can say to wrap it all up, sorry for rambling, is that I do believe that there is a standard that they're falling off of, but I do agree that there should be while I do believe there is a transparency, I do agree with you guys on the premise that there should be slightly more transparency in how they're delivering the news to everybody.
Okay. Sorry, Arya, I had to mute you because of the background.
No, you're so good.
Tyler's point. So, since in the interest of time, I think we're just going to switch. We're just going to go to closing remarks right now, and then just end it there, just because we just don't really have that much time left.
Oh,
but,
okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's no worries. No worries. Arya, do you want to go first, and then Micah, then myself?
Yeah, I guess I think that like my issues with this is like a running theme with all three of the contentions that we had, is just it's really like taking like I don't know, like killing yourself because you have a headache. Like it's such an overreaction for the actual problems that were there initially. Like with DOGE, they ended up accidentally firing nuclear arms controllers that were like super like specially trained for their job, and they ended up having to like hire them again, but it was over a weekend. They fired them on a Friday, so they couldn't get them back into work on the Monday. So there's just like 2 days that there was like confusion over whether or not these people were working and who was guarding these things. It's a good intention. The way that it's being executed right now is like a little kid that just went into just went in with like a chainsaw, just knocking over anything that doesn't look good. As far as like the different like wasteful government programs, I think that your definition of wasteful and my definition of wasteful are obviously going to be super different because we're coming from two completely different places. And I think that the whole purpose of DOGE would be to be like a nonpartisan, like in the middle, like, okay, let's find out what is wasteful on both sides. And I think that it's not doing that. It's very clearly going after one side and protecting another side. And that's also another issue that I have with it, because as a government agency that's supposed to be enforcing accountability, there's problems on both sides. And I think that if you don't admit that, that's just inherently dishonest as an agency.
So I'll give a very quick like closing remark, and then we'll pass it on to Micah, and then he can like finish this for us. So like Arya says, like our definition of waste is ultimately going to be very arbitrary. It's also going to be depending on like whatever your ideology is. However, fraud has a very specific definition. It has a legal context, and so far I haven't seen any conviction or at the very least charge of fraud coming in from DOGE right now. I understand that like it hasn't been around very long, and like that's kind of the point. But I'm very disappointed. Not surprised, but very disappointed with what has been going on with DOGE when other agencies, such as whether it's the Department of Justice, where it's a government accountability office, have been doing a much better job of seeking out fraud and actually having charges and convictions and of the ongoing cases than what DOGE has accomplished. And I think that DOGE is doing more harm than it is good. Or the fact that it's been laying off a lot of federal employees that are career-oriented employees, people who are nonpartisan, that are just there to sort of do their job. And I'm very concerned of what's going to happen in regards to everything from the Department of Education to our VAs, and also possibly in the research side as well, since I actually work in research. But yeah, and then pass it on to you, Micah.
Yeah. Well, just a few points that you mentioned there. It talked about sort of an overreaction, that DOGE is an overreaction. I don't think so. I think when you look at it, you have government waste, and there's been multiple points that DOGE has given us of, hey, look at this DEI program in this other country, or this sex changes in this country or whatnot. Like these are wasteful spending. And that kind of goes to your other point about how our definitions of waste might be different, which is probably somewhat true. They probably do somewhat depend on our ideologies, which is why I think it was good we talked about other programs too. But I think overall, I just don't really see where the more harm than good where that is. I don't see more harm than good being done. Of course, like always, whenever you start cutting back things, there's always going to be harms. That's inevitable, right? You can like a good analogy would be like pruning a bush or a rose bush or something like that. You're probably going to cut off some things that are healthy, right? But that's necessary for the overall health of the plant. And so in the same way, right, like DOGE may come in and they may cut some things that, or recommend cutting some things that are actually good in the long run. But overall, a lot of their cuts have actually been very beneficial. And that's why they're a recommendation program. They're not actually making these cuts themselves. That's why you have department heads like Marco Rubio disagreeing with Elon on some things and saying, no, we actually need this. We're going to keep this in. And so I think you already have that sort of built-in accountability with DOGE. They've found, again, the $321 billion of waste and have identified this. I think that's huge, and I think that's very good. And overall, DOGE has been a success.
All right, Tyler, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciated your guys' perspectives, and you guys do have valid concerns and criticisms. I did do a little bit of research into the whole debacle with the nuclear scientists. I definitely need to look further into that. Not saying you guys, I just like yeah, you guys are definitely right on that. That's a big uh-oh there. And yeah, you guys are, I think Arya said it best, the best statement of the agree to disagree of this whole issue of like how our sides define waste and fraud. It's, you know, like broken record, but I'll say it again. It's too bad that we can't like go through the whole list of everything, because the biggest question I would love to ask you guys, not even just you guys specifically, but just on the other side in general, if you are in favor of like keeping those grants and contracts or whatever things that were cut that was classified as waste, obviously not the specific ones that were brought back, but like the main ones, like from Micah and I's perspective, the question I would ask is like, what was the need for it to begin with, or why do we need to spend so much? That's like the one main idea I would love to, that I actually want to hear more from the other side of, that I need to do, put in the effort to hearing more of. So that's definitely my biggest takeaway from the other side. To Micah's point, I think I do still agree at the end of the day, DOGE has been a net positive and necessary step in relieving this issue in government. And to his point, yeah, there's definitely not 100% agreement. You know, it's all about because at the end of the day, these executive agencies like Marco Rubio, the State Department, gets the final say on what the process will be for how of DOGE's recommendations, or you'll have other ones like Pete Hegseth of the DOD, or John Radcliffe of the CIA, who is 100% on board and is more than welcome for them to go like clean house essentially, which I don't know where you guys stand on it, but I think that they definitely are in need of that. We probably agree on that, but for different reasons, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, I think, I at least we can acknowledge that waste and fraud is a problem regardless. And I guess the best thing that we can all do, since this should be a voters mandate initiative, in my opinion, which is kind of like what it was as a result of this past election, I think that we can all work together to come up with our own DOGE initiative, like bipartisan DOGE initiatives, for not just for the federal government, but also at the state and local ones too. So that way we can not just waste but also reallocate it for things that will actually benefit our lives through our local governments. And I think that will also be a net positive in itself. And that is my final thought.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for this debate. I really appreciate it. If you're watching this on my channel, I will leave a link for everyone's social in the description below. And until then, stay classy.